It's time for Mama Bear Donita on the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast. Welcome to the Sharing Den, where we share cancer stories, products, and information to support anyone going through the journey. We will be there for you. We will be there with you. Now, welcome Mama Bear Donita.
Hi, this is Mama Bear Donita, and you are listening to the Mama Bear Cancer Support Radio podcast on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Ear Network family. My podcasts are also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Miami Community Radio, and the SOB Network. And today I want to welcome Darren. Darren Burch is a 29-year veteran of the Phoenix Police Department with over 100 commendations, who currently hosts several radio shows called The Badge Boys, just called Badge Boys and 5-0 Info, and has completed his new book, Twisted But True, a collection of riveting true crime stories drawn from actual cases worked by Sergeant Burch during his long and decorated career. Hello, Darrin. Thank you. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you being on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I wanted to I met you. There's a Facebook group that does podcasts, and I can't remember the other name, maybe recordings of the group. And you and I are in the same group. And we got to talking, and I invited you on the show because I think it's important to have other things other than just cancer. But you do have a cancer connection. I know that. So I appreciate. Tell us about your police career and why you came to write a book.
Yes, 30 years of police work, 10 years in patrol, 10 years as a detective, 10 years in supervisor, so I kind of was evenly spread out, if you will. As a detective, worked everything from burglary to homicides, though the bulk of my career was dedicated to rape investigations, and there is a connection with cancer with that. My grandmother, who sadly died with cancer, I don't think you can meet someone who doesn't have a connection to cancer. It's just so prevalent, sadly. And she was the inspiration for my investigative career because something that horrifically happened to her as a young girl. And so that kind of dedicated me to in the world of sexual assault investigations. But I've recently retired and then wrote the book. So I'm on my second career, if you will. And it's kind of exciting, this retirement gig I got.
Right? Isn't it fun to have a show? They're fun.
They are absolutely. And there's so much fun, not just doing the show, but talking to such interesting people. I have several radio shows, like you said, because the end cap of my career was as a Crime Stopper sergeant, which connects and partners with local TV and radio and print and so forth. And so I got a chance to be a guest on a lot of radio shows, and one of the local stations out here wanted me to host a show called 5-0 Info, 5-0 being police, kind of like a silly connection.
Oh, everybody knows that. They're in the town live that doesn't know that 5-0 means police. Even I know that. When I hear the big 5-0, I'm like, oh, well, that's the police. I need to go behave.
See, I'm dating myself.
I would ever not behave.
I always think of it as Hawaii 5-0, with
right? Oh, of course. And now they've come out with another show, so it's Javelin all over again.
But so I love I do a podcast like yourself with a gentleman by the name of Jason Sheckerly, who sadly was horrifically scarred and burnt in a patrol car collision when a taxi cab flew into him at over 100 miles per hour.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it blew up, and he was horrifically burnt, literally alive in his car. If it wasn't for our great burn center and some fast-acting firemen that saved his life. But I do a show with him, and it's just so wonderful to meet him every day and get to talk to this inspirational person that survived something that most people couldn't survive in a million years. But more than that, to take that and grow from it. That saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and he's that personified.
Well, and yeah, I understand because I hit a lot of those stories too. But I've come to realize that it usually takes a great tragedy to get some of our greatest works, whether it be art or written word or whatever, a lot of architecture, whatever it is. It takes some catalyst in your life to usually produce that. And I have also noticed that if you can overcome something like burning in a car, then, the world is at your feet. Basically, you can pretty much overcome anything. It's just whether you actually recover and realize that. So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that is so true. And that's really how my first chapter of my book starts off. When I was 17 years old, me and my friends went to I'll admit it, I drank alcohol as a 17-year-old. You heard it here first. Breaking news.
You terrible person. Okay.
Thank you. Right.
We went to Juarez. I grew up in El Paso, so all we had to do was walk across reach the counter and have a nickel. We were good. So, I get it.
So, yeah, my four of us went to a huge 30 keg party in the desert. Coming back home, luckily, we're smart. We had one designated driver among us. And at some point, this is dating the time now, a Javelin car. So this is in the late 70s, right? Yeah, I hear the giggle. Javelin passed us and unfortunately lost control and careened into a power pole. And it wasn't like the movies or like poor Jason Shackley. It didn't explode. It just caught on fire, but it was a slow-moving fire. And we were able to get two of the passengers out of the vehicle. Another one was ejected through the windshield, and this, again, in the late 70s. That wasn't that
no seatbelt rules, yeah.
Yeah, and no giveaway glass and so forth. So when she went through, truly a old school pane of glass, and it just ripped her apart, bless her heart. And then the last person, I was trying to get out. I was the smallest guy. My nickname of the group was Boo, so from the Yogi Bear Boo Boo. So I was small, I was petite, so it was a no-brainer for me to try to squeeze in as the car was on fire. And sadly, I got to her, but could not disengage the seatbelt, and so I got burnt and couldn't get her out. And that was one of those defining moments in my life where I realized I could overcome something so horrible and tragic, and it was somewhat of a blueprint for my becoming a police officer.
Sure.
And unfortunately, an obsession to save lives, to the point of being stupid. For 30 years, I just couldn't go fast enough or quick enough to some person in need of or in trouble to try to save them. I didn't think of myself as a Superman, but I had an overwhelming obsession to save lives.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Boy, I get that. Mm-hmm. It's like when you find something out and you're like, or like in your case, you feel that people, well, of course, I mean, that's your job, a police officer. I used to teach first grade, and we would bring police officers in at least once a year, if not twice a year. And the kids were just so in awe, and they're so loving and kind. And, it's like, I feel like a police officer is kind of like a teacher, and that you just get overlooked. Like you're like, and a nurse, like, oh, thank you for doing everything that you're doing, but, we're going to keep you guys at minimal pay and everything else just for whatever reason. And it's really a driven call. I mean, you really don't just wake up and say, oh, I think I'm going to be a police officer or a teacher one day. It's something you have to have in your heart, because it's definitely not monetarily supplemented. So.
I could not agree any stronger, especially as it relates to a teacher, because you guys are vastly underpaid, whereas police officers, depending on department, they anywhere from paid poorly to paid well. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely a calling, and I would further that to the extent that you're not going to retire from that unless it's truly a passion and a calling, because it's so difficult. My daughter was a teacher for 5 years and got pregnant. Now she's homeschooling kids. I shouldn't say homeschooling, but she has a daycare where she has kids and so forth as she gets to watch her child, and then we'll go back to teaching. But yeah, it's definitely truly a calling, and you have to have that passion to stay with something that's definitely, like you said, not for monetary reasons.
No. So you wrote your book, and it was funny. I was looking at it. It's called Twisted but True. And I like the warning on there. It's kind of funny. It lets you know that this is not fluffy. It's pretty intense. And what was the outcome you expected for your book? Like what set you up for your book?
It's funny. That's a good question. When part of my job as the silent witness sergeant or the Crime Stopper sergeant was to connect with TV and radio and so forth. And I had this gig on a rock and roll morning show where they wanted me to tell these stupid suspect stories and off the internet. I really didn't trust the internet. This is in 2008, 2009. And I didn't really have a good feel for the internet, what was real, what wasn't real. So I didn't want to say something that was completely fictitious. Here I am, a cop, reciting the story that's not true. So I would tell my own stories, not because I thought I had the greatest stories, but, I had some pretty funny stories. There was a black cloud that always followed me. It really did. And I ended up calling the segment Twisted But True Tales. And it became so popular because it's a lot of deprecating humor, not just stupid suspect stories, but dumb Darrin dilemmas, if you will. And so I would tell these, and they became so popular that there was a local following. So I knew the book would have a following a little bit and would be successful locally. And the reason for the book was as a fundraiser. 100% of my proceeds go to the nonprofit Crime Stoppers program here locally called Silent Witness. But what I didn't expect was the overwhelming support. It became an Amazon bestseller based on social media through LinkedIn and so forth. And now it's being sold in Australia and Japan and Denmark.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's so that's overwhelming. That's humbling.
Well, it's well deserved too. I mean, you went through all these episodes. So, and I think when you write from your heart, which is what you did because you experienced it, it really makes a difference in reading too. You almost feel like you're there and you're like excitingly getting to be a part of it, but it's very safe because you can close the book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, in fact, a lot of critics talk about, like I always joke, I'm an author, but I'm not a writer. So they talk about when you read, each chapter is a very short story. Most of them are funny, not all. It starts off tragic with that car accident. I talk about that in the first chapter. The last chapter is something horrific that occurs. I've had family members that have died from cancer. So as I go through various trials and tribulations of the job, I kind of bring in that. And so I'm hoping the book is very humanizing for the police profession, because if there's ever a time we needed to humanize police, it's now.
Oh, sure. Was the experience cathartic?
It was absolutely cathartic. Again, I lost so many lives during my 30-year career. In fact, I lost my son, my mother, and my only sibling, rather, in a 4-year period. And so the book, I think, really did kind of save me, because as a cop, you go through some horrible, horrible things, and you learn, just by the nature of the job, you learn how to kind of desensitize yourself and you avoid the sadness that you're dealing with, and you go into what a lot of cops refer to as cop mode. You go into this, I don't want to say cold and callous, but you're able to distance yourself from the horrific tragedy. Otherwise, you couldn't do your job. And I think I did that on a very personal level. So when I wrote the book, even though it's very funny, trust me, it's funny, but oh my gosh, like the last chapter, it took me so long to write it because I was just so sad at times thinking about some of the things I've gone through. So it was very cathartic, because at some point you got to address that pain, or it just grows.
It grows in some strange ways too.
Thank you.
And so I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom and your brother and your son. That is heartbreaking, and I'm sure that you struggle with it every day. And I'm glad that you turned your sadness into a book to make other people feel better and laugh and realize that these terrible things do happen. But and your mom and your brother were from cancer?
Yes, my mother was from cancer, and my brother was from cancer. My brother had pancreatic cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And as soon as you say pancreatic, anyone that knows anything about cancer understands how all cancer is bad. All cancer is bad, but it's just so aggressive, pancreatic cancer.
Well, and there's no cure. So it's just basically, I'm not being mean, it's just a death sentence. He was very... I have a few clients that had it, and they passed away. And honestly, it's one of the reasons that I take very few clients now, because I can't handle that, actually. Like, I'm not very good at them dying on me at the end, and I can't do it anymore, but I want to still share all of my information and podcasts and things